Hey guys, Solomon here. I hope you all are having a great day. Today's video, we're going to be looking at how to checkmate the opponent's king with only a bishop and a knight. Let's get right into it. In this position here, we're actually pretty close to winning the game, okay? And it really comes down to asking ourselves two questions. First question, right? What kind of bishop do we have? Is it on a light square or a dark square? Well, in this case, we have a bishop on a light square. The second question we got to ask is, okay, based on that, which two corners would we like the king to get to? Right? Obviously in chess you have four corners, right? A1, A8, H8, and H1. And the color of the bishop determines a lot, because if this bishop is a light squared bishop, like in this instance, we don't want this king on a dark square, right? Dark square on a dark square corner. We want this king to be on a light square corner like A8 or H1, because our bishop can hit both of those spots, right? One thing to also look at here is the fact that with the knight on the board, with the knight not on the board, whatever, the king and the bishop by themselves are trapping this king, right? This king only has two squares and it's going back and forth. The question now is, okay, we got the king trapped. What do we do with our knight? How do we dance that guy around? Well, I mean, if we bring our knight eventually to a square like D7, it's going to either be stalemate or the king is just going to start running out, right? Because the knight blocks off that bishop. What about a square like C6? Let's say we play knight A5. Notice, by the way, knight C6 right away, stalemate. Right, as you see highlighted, okay? And yeah, even if we waste a move and play bishop back and then throw in a check after king A8, if we move this bishop anywhere, it's just a stalemate, right? Including E4, because the knight is in the way, right? In this case, we're going to have to move the knight or run away with the king to give black some breathing room. This is not the best way to go about it, okay? So instead of playing knight A5 going for C6, what other option do we have to attack the square of B8, right? That is that square of A6, okay? So we're going to play this move of knight C5, right? Notice, got to be careful, knight A6, that's a stalemate. But what we can do is waste a turn while keeping an eye on that C8 square and then throw in a check. And notice now with the knight out of the way of this long diagonal, we can simply throw this bishop to the center of the board. We have a checkmate, and this is a game over. Remember, going back, right, we look at, you know, this move of knight c5, and this is good for two reasons, right? First off, it doesn't impact, right, bringing this knight to a6, this doesn't impact the fact that the king is still trapped on two squares, okay? Whereas knight d7, this king could potentially run out depending on what the tempo is at, okay? And the second reason is that it simply keeps this diagonal open, okay? We want to check this king, right? Obviously we waste a move, but we want to check this king and leave that diagonal open so that the bishop can get the job done. Let's now take a look at a position in which case we have the king on the edge of the board, which is great, but it's not in the correct corner. How do we go about this, right? Well, let's take a look at the following position. So as we know, we have a light squared bishop, so we want to get this king to a light square corner. The issue is that this king is not really close to either one. Okay, but I will say that it is closer to the square of A8 than it is to H1, so let's force the king there. The next question you got to ask yourself, right, and obviously we didn't ask this in the last example, we showed the finished product, but now we got to ask ourselves a question, okay, what kind of W technique do I want to write up here? And the W technique involves our knight, okay? You're going to pick the square that you want to force that king to, and then you're only gonna look one square diagonal, okay? Not two or three, but one square diagonal. This is where your knight is gonna end up. And based on where the king is, you're gonna draw a W formation towards that side, right? So let's say the king was over here and our pieces were all over there. Well, we would want our knight to finish on this square, and then we draw the W, right? The W can be sideways, upside down. It could be, you know, a normal looking W, like in this case. At the end of the day, it's all about the pattern of play. And what is the knight doing on these squares, right? Such as B7, D7, and F7. The knight's actually taking away the dark squares, right? H8, F8, and D8. So our knight is going to take away the dark squares, our bishop is going to take away the light, and we're slowly going to keep forcing this king, taking one square away at a time until that king is in the corner and we have a mate, right, with that bishop on that long diagonal. In this case, we already have our knight in the perfect spot, right, for the W technique, okay? We start the knight here and we want to finish on this square. And from that point, you can dance and probably get your knight to a6 as we just covered, and we'll cover again, okay? But all right, what do we do here? So it's white's move. We've already taken away h8. How do we take away the square of g8? Well, let's just waste a move, right? This is one of the biggest things, in endgames, right? Tempo, using moves and oftentimes making it your opponent's turn. Right, we see this in opposition with the kings. And in bishop and knight endgames, one of the biggest mistakes that can be made is just never making a waiting move. And guess what? If you never do, you probably don't have a very good chance of winning. It's not all about how do I win right now. It's about, okay, wait, let me take a second here. If it was my opponent's turn, would they have to give something up? Would they have to give away a square? And in this case, the answer is yes. Since we wasted a move, black can't just sit there and go, you know what? I don't want to move. It's your turn, right? They got to move here. And by doing so, they have to give away this h7 square, right? This is the only move they have. They had to give that away. So we're going to take it. And guess what? We now have the next square taken away. Well, what's next on the list? Well, we got to take away f8. And we're going to do that by continuing, right, this W technique. Okay. Again, we go 1, 2, 3, and we finish here. But the purpose of this is to take away h8. And now we're going to be looking to take away the square of f8. Okay, black moves here. Let's start moving that knight. There's actually a couple of different moves here. We're going to be looking at this move of king d8 in just a bit. And this is actually black's best try to try and fight for a draw, or at least try to make it a little bit more complicated for us. At the end of the day, we're still more than winning. It's just pretty straightforward once you study it. But in this case, let's say this king moves over, right? Let's say the king really doesn't want to go to the light squared corner and they just keep running back. Well, all right, we throw in a check, right? That's taken away and that's taken away. What's the next square we got to take away? Well, we've taken away these three. Next on the list is e8. So we're going to bring that king over. And when the king moves over here, same thing, right? We're just going to keep making progress. And look, if you want to run back, bishop check, right? Pretty simple. In this kind of situation, with the kings facing one another, again, we got to make a waiting move. Okay, we got to make a waiting move here, because if we play knight c5, right, continuing the W technique, and then we see the move king c8, obviously knight b7 here just loses a piece, right? So what I'm going to recommend, and by the way, even in this position, you can make a waiting move, but what I'm going to recommend, okay, going back to this check and king over position, when you have kings facing off like this in the center of the board with a knight in the middle and it's your turn, just make a waiting move and then play the move of knight c5. And notice, if the king runs back to the center, we now have a check, right? We have a check, and from this point, we have to play aggressively with our king, okay? We can't, just run away with the knight somewhere. We got to bring our king in, and yet again, we got to play king over to b6. Our goal is to force that king into a 2-square prison with our king and our bishop, right? And something that I've seen players do is, okay, in this kind of position, they're thinking, let's take away this square, let's play here, right? And then the king runs this way, and then, oh, okay, well, let's take away that square. And then the king runs this way again, and our bishop just ends up kind of moving back and forth. We don't need to play this move right now, right? Because if we bring this king over, the king is now stuck on these 2 squares, and it could go to this square right here. However, we have a check. And because this knight takes away the dark square and our bishop takes away the light, the king is forced right back, right? We danced that knight. Again, got to make a waiting move here so that we get that knight move with check, and we finish it off on this long diagonal. All right, now going back to knight c5, what if our opponent doesn't go to the center, in which case we just check and bring our king in, followed by our bishop, dance with the knight, waste of tempo, win the game. What happens if black runs to the corner? Well, in this case, you can just run over with your king as well, okay? If a move like, king c8, for example, we're just going to continue with knight b7. And going back, if you see a move like king a7, all right, we can play king c7, force that king into a 2-square prison. Notice the knight here is actually not needed to keep that king in a prison, right? The bishop and the king are doing the work, and now we got to get our knight to this square so that our bishop can finish it off on the long diagonal. So, okay, we start dancing, we go 1, 2, here we can go right away, we don't have to waste a move there because we have it with check, bishop d5, ball game. That's it. Okay. Now let's go back real quick to knight e5. Now, really, if you play king f8, we throw in a check, we do all that. From that point, black's kind of just stuck on the edge of the board. But right here, black does have a brief opportunity to make a run for it. Okay. And that is by playing this move of king d8 and hoping to get out. Right. Now, in this case, if you have this type of position and you see the king run towards the center, I have a very simple, kind of technique here that you can rely on. It's king over and then continue the W, right? So when the king starts to run like that, just go again, 1 and 2. Don't even think about it. Just go 1 and 2. Okay. Now this may seem a little bit strange. It may seem like the king is starting to run, but at the end of the day, this knight is covering these dark squares pretty well. And now it's up to the bishop to force this king back. Where is this king wanting to go? Well, the only square that it can go in terms of running out of our little trap here is actually going to b5, right? c7, b7, both of these squares, we're not too worried about it. The king's getting closer to the edge of the board. b5, though, we got to be worried about this a little bit, right? Because we don't want to let this king just start making a run for it again, okay? So what do? We bring our bishop in, right? All right, let's say the king goes back. Well, in that case, we play here. Right, we're taking those 2 squares away. We're taking that away. We're taking that away. All of a sudden, just by kind of using this technique, right, of king over, knight to d7, and then kind of dancing with the bishop a little bit, this king is going to be forced to walk all the way back to the sideline. We bring our king in, and okay, we're back to where we were. Okay, we move the knight, throw in a check, bring the king in very aggressively, throw that bishop in. In this case, we got to waste a tempo so that we have that knight move with check, and we finish this thing off with a mate. Okay, we're now going to look at a position in which case we don't have the king on the edge of the board, right? And really the biggest thing that you can do for yourself in this kind of situation when it starts out is go, okay, I don't necessarily care about which corner the king goes to right away. Of course, we would prefer for the king to run to the square that our bishop is attacking or is able to attack, but we can't always control that. What we can control is forcing the king to touch this sideline of the board. Let's take a look at the position here. In a position like this, black is in the very center, right? Now, again, we would love for the king to just start running to a square like here or here. However, if black knows what they're doing, they're not going to do that, right? And oftentimes, if you play this kind of position against stockfish will literally run straight to the corner, which is still kind of interesting to me, but that's often what's best for black. It's often best for black to just run straight to the corner that it can't get mated on, simply due to the fact that if black waits around too long, they might not be able to fully get to that corner, okay? But all right, what do we do here? Well, the objective is to get this king to touch the sideline. That is all we're worried about, right? Get this king to touch one of these squares, okay? And notice here, it's a little bit hard for black to stay in this area, especially once we centralize our pieces. When you can activate your king, do it, right? King over, all right, we'll keep activating our king. King over, knight f3, cover that dark square, that's totally good. Throw in a little check, activate the king again, right? And here we have this move of king e4. This is considered shouldering, all right? We're not getting direct opposition, but with our bishop here, and our king here as well, we're kind of shouldering this king to make a decision, right? Do they want to run towards this side of the board, in which case they're actually only one step away from the sideline, or do they want to run back? Okay, in that instance, we bring the bishop in, we centralize the bishop. Notice how we're centralizing our pieces so that they control a lot of squares. If black, keeps fighting for that central control, we play here. This is considered double opposition. Not just our king, but also our bishop is involved, right? And that's what makes this, double opposition. This king is forced to go back. There's no way around it. And when it does, we'll keep making progress. And this is kind of the idea, right? We use our king and our bishop to take that central control, drive the king back, and our knight kind of dances around, taking away escape routes, okay? Now, in this case, black goes here. How is black trying to escape? Well, black is trying to go 1-2. Right? And maybe start running again. How can we use our knight to take away that square? Well, we bring it back to d2, play knight c4. Y'all, this is just not a move anymore, right? Notice how we used our knight on the outside of the board to prevent this king from having different routes, okay? Let's say black brings this king towards the center. let's activate our king. This bishop and knight do a beautiful job of taking away these 4 squares, and our king is now getting involved in the mix as well. King over, let's play aggressively, right? And by the way, this is the reason why stockfish sometimes will just run right to the corner, because you know, the engine doesn't want to get stuck in a position like this where the king's already pretty close to the corner that we want it on. Okay, king goes over. Okay, let's bring that king to the 6th rank. Play a move like bishop over. This king's only a couple squares away. And okay, just because, right, we don't need to do a full W here doesn't mean that we don't need the technique, right? Again, what square do we want this king on? Well, we want it here or here, but obviously the king's a lot closer to A8. So then we look 1 square diagonal. This is where the knight's going to end up. The reason for that is that it wants to take away the square of D8. Right now, if the king's over here, we got to use this knight to take away this dark square and this dark square, right? But in this case, we just got to take away that one. So let's bring that knight to that square one, you know, to that option, in which case the knight is 1 square diagonal of the corner, right? And then, okay, now the king is forced that direction. In this case, we can bring that bishop back, play actively with the king, play actively with the king, and again, force that king into a little 2 square prison. Dance that knight, make a waiting move. Okay, notice when we make this waiting move, we are keeping an eye on this square. If we make a waiting move over here or something, that's not going to work because black can just potentially start to run. But okay, we keep an eye on that square, throw in a check. Black, because of that, because of the fact that this bishop is still trapping that king, the king is forced back. We finish on the long diagonal, and we have ourselves a ball game. Okay, so we're about to go on chess.com, and on that they have a tool in which case you can work on your end games. You know, you get winning positions against stockfish, and you have to try to convert them. Okay, so it's great practice. The tool that I'm about to be using is bishop and knight versus king, and you get 5 positions to play through. It starts out easy, and it gets harder and harder. And hopefully I can share my thought process with you guys, and hopefully this can help you guys, you know, just get more and more aware and, you know, in touch with the knight and bishop idea. So let's start this thing off. As y'all can see here, my record time is 1:27, still trying to get that down, but okay, let's start this thing off. Okay, so first position here. In all honesty, some of the first positions are not super realistic if you're doing the W technique, which is what I recommend, because if we do the W technique, right, the knight would be here and the bishop would be somewhere along this diagonal trapping that king. But okay, let's just play the position. We have a mate and 2 there. This is a little bit more realistic. So yeah, we have a bishop and a king, which is really, I mean, just trapping this king between 2 squares. Where do we want this knight? Well, we don't want it here because first off, it could be stalemate. On top of that, it blocks the bishop from checkmating. And the knight here, it could be stalemate, or the king is going to run. So where do we bring this knight? We bring it here. Now this could still be stalemate, so we gotta wait, you know, we gotta waste a tempo. However, right, we bring that knight over, we waste that tempo. Now when we check, the bishop is not blocked. That's mate. Okay, we have this position now. So where do we want this king to go? Well, we want this king to touch A1, right? Or H8, based on our dark squared bishop. And I'm going to say H8 is a little bit easier here, based on the fact that this bishop is already taking away A7, okay? So we want the king to go here. Let's look 1 square diagonal of that. Okay, we want our knight to touch this square eventually, and let's draw a W towards the opponent's king based on that spot. All right, we got to get the knight here. Let's do it, right? You can even pre-move it there. Waste a turn. Boom, right? We take away 1 square, 2 squares. Let's bring the knight back. King over, right? The king's making a run for, again, 1 and 2. It might look like the king's getting out, but if you use your dark squared bishop correctly, taking away squares, the king is going to be forced back and back and back. And now they're back on the sideline. Okay, we use a turn here. We throw the bishop in. What's the next square we got to take away? E8, right? We're taking all of these one by one. This is the next square. So we bring the knight back, throw in a check, play aggressively with this king. Again, we don't want to just move this bishop back and forth forever. We want to trap the king with the bishop and the king, dance this knight, waste that tempo, throw in the check, mate. That's it. Okay, so this is actually, you know, really the most difficult part of this whole thing. What I'm showing you with the W technique, that is just muscle memory. I mean, you can get to the point where you're pre-moving it all the time. In fact, you know, shout out to my guy, Adam Safer. At the end of this video, we're going to be looking at, you know, his kind of ability to just pre-move and get it done quickly. But okay, we have this position here. What do? Well, we got to centralize our pieces, right? If we want to force the king to the edge of the board, we gotta throw our pieces into the center so that this king can't be there anymore. Okay, so let's do it. Let's activate the king, double opposition. All right, activate the king, throw in a check. All right, we'll do that. We'll activate the king again. Notice that Stockfish is kind of running this king pretty quickly over to the corner when they don't need to, but they don't want to get trapped. Right, they don't want to fight for these two squares, right, and then get trapped halfway over. So we'll just keep making progress, right? Keep making progress, and now we will get our knight involved. Okay. So again, we want to force this king to that square. Okay, let's look one square diagonal of that. This is where we want our knight to eventually be, and let's draw a W towards the opponent's king. All right, we want the knight there, so let's get it there. Throw the knight there. We took away that square. Let's take away this square next. Let's take away this square next. So we're going to do this. And if the king runs, we have our 1 and our 2. Again, the king can run all they want. We're just going to keep moving our bishop. Keep forcing that king back. All right. Waste of tempo. Throw it in. Check. Play aggressively with this king. Throw in that check. We're going to go for the square that, we can throw in a check while also not interrupting this long square diagonal. Okay, and our last position here, our knight's attack, so let's just run away with it, right? Activate our king, knight in, bishop in. Knight back is fine. We'll activate our king. Again, right, we keep getting the same kind of area. The king keeps running over here, but all right, we want the king to get to this square. Let's look one square diagonal. Okay, the knight's got to get there. Let's draw a W towards the opponent's king. By the way, let's just say that the king was over here and we had pieces over here, right? And we wanted to force the king this way. Well, in that case, we would draw the W this way, right? You're just going to draw the W wherever the king is, okay? Because obviously in this position, us putting the knight here and doing this would just be kind of silly with the king all the way over here. Okay, but again, the king's over here on b8, so we're going to draw that W back. Let's start this thing off by getting the knight there in the first place. So, okay, we play knight there, we throw in the check, waste of tempo, take away the next square, knight back, king over, right? We have our 1-2, and the bishop here. At a certain point, you could even pre-move this against Stockfish, just keep doing the pattern. I almost played king over. That would be a mistake because this king would run. No reason to move that king, right? You can just throw in a check and then bring the king over, right? Throw in that check there. Waste of tempo. Boom. Checkmate. That's it. So yeah, I mean, bishop and knight, it might seem intimidating, and honestly, in a lot of ways it is. I've been playing chess for almost 20 years. I recently got the national master title, and I did learn how to do bishop and knight right before that. But yeah, I mean, I've been playing for a very long time, and I just kind of kept pushing it off. Like, well, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. It's difficult. It's going to take time. What if I can't get it? It just seems so, intimidating, all that kind of stuff. And okay, I get it. I was there, but I will also say, when you study an endgame, even if you never reach it, which by the way, I've never reached knight and bishop against king, even if you never reach it, it's going to help the rest of your chess, right? It helps with piece coordination. And the more you know about chess, the better you're going to get, right? On this channel, I've covered hundreds of openings, and in all honesty, I did not think that it would help my chess, right? I did not think that it would help me improve studying openings that I'm probably never going to play seriously in over the board chess, but it does help, right? There might be openings that I don't play, like the Catalan, right? Or like the English opening, right? In over the board chess, but there's certain ideas, right, that I learn, and that helps the rest of my chess game as a whole. Okay, same goes with endgames. Even if you never reach it, your chess game will improve. Okay, and you just get that extra level of confidence. If you know all the theoretical endgames all the way up to bishop and knight, and you reach an endgame, you're not even going to have to think about how to win. You're going to know how to do it. You're going to play the moves, and that's going to be it. Now let's finish this thing out by covering a little screen recording that one of my private students sent me, Adam Safe, where we were covering knight and bishop endgames for a couple sessions, and then he started working on it, and he actually has a faster time than I do by quite a bit. He's like seriously good at knight and bishop versus king now. But yeah, let's just take a look. Thought I'd share this. He does the same thing, right? The five practice things. That I don't even know how to commentate on this. It's going so fast. But okay, yeah, he puts that knight in the W position, king over, knight up, dances around that bishop, ways to move with the bishop, knight back, king over, ways to move again, throw in a check, long diagonal, that's it. Okay. King activated, double opposition there. King keeps activating, knight dancing around. King activates, king activates, king activates, king activates. A lot of activating kings, by the way. Yeah, knight gets into that beginning of the W position. We have the 1-2. Bishop starts dancing. King comes over. Bishop wastes a turn. Knight comes over. King plays aggressive. King stuck in a 2-square box. Knight to the edge. Bishop comes in a long diagonal. That's it. Okay, bishop comes in. King activated. King activated. King activated, king activated, bishop into that spot, knight into the, into the W position. We have all our pre-moves, king over, bishop, bishop, knight, knight again. King plays over aggressively, bishop wastes tempo, knight dances over to the H file, and we have a checkmate on the long diagonal. Great job by my guy Adam. And yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comment section below if you have any questions about any points in this video that you're confused about. Like if there's any, just send a timestamp so I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay, sometimes I'll have people say, why didn't you play knight F3? And it's like, well, I don't, and I love the question, but at the same time, I don't know where in the video you're talking about, like literally at all. So just send me the timestamp, right? Where in the video it is. If it's 8:28, just go 8, right? And then 28, just like you're filling out a time or something. And then give me your question and I'll try to get back to as many questions as I can. In fact, I promise to respond to every single one, which, is, related and focused on the game of chess. Okay. Again, hope you all enjoyed this video and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe to this channel as well as hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on anything coming your way. On top of that, I wanted to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters for the month of October in 2023. We have some recently added benefits and I would love for y'all to join the team. I'll see y'all in the next one.